Ho ho ho!
Look who's here.
You gotta be kidding me.
Someone set up a background.
Man, now I look like the homeless person. Like,
You went from first to worst. Or you go to your mom and you complain about your husband. Like, it always comes with this other cost.
Motherhood fills your time, but not your mind. I felt some type of way.
well, then I felt bad being like, I'm gonna fight this woman.
Welcome back to Momtradiction. Today's contradiction is magic versus mundane, brought to you courtesy of Dr. Lily J. And if that name doesn't ring a bell, you're not alone. I never heard of her or her husband until she released this letter, but here's the story. She's a psychologist and new mom whose high school sweetheart left her for Ariana Grande while they were filming Wicked. And somehow, in the middle of all that heartbreak, she delivered a beautifully eloquent essay to moms everywhere. Her letter hit home for all three of us, but for different reasons. So stick around as we dive into Dr. J's story and a few quotes. We'll share our take on therapy and try to decide if motherhood is more magic or mostly mundane. And don't miss the end, where we reveal what we're nailing and failing this week. Because let's face it, motherhood is a never-ending battle of contradictions. And take a second to like or subscribe, or even better, leave us a comment. Let us know in the comments what your take on Dr. Lily J's letter is. Let's get started.
Welcome back.
Welcome back
to
to
Hey,
episode
everybody.
4 of
Number 4.
Momtradiction.
This week, this article that was on the cut, just her own reflections on motherhood and like new motherhood and having been married to a celebrity basically, and highlighting the impact that it's had on her career as a psychologist. So it stood out to me. There was a couple of things that she said in the article just about how this has impacted her personally, right? But also this idea of, as a therapist, she wants to be invisible. So she hasn't been on social media. She's not a person that's big into like interviews and stuff because as a therapist, there's a relationship that she has with her patients where like they really shouldn't know about her personal life. Because as a patient, like you don't really want to know about your therapist's personal life.
Imagine like if you are seeing a therapist and then you like Google them and you're like, oh my God, she's married to like, I don't know, someone cool. Cause I mean, no offense. Was he really that famous?
Well, have you guys
Yeah.
seen the clips of like Ariana Grande and the co-star, like the good witch
Yes.
and the bad witch or whatever? They're like
Yeah.
weird. Like people are
They
starting to
have
be
a
like, are
weird
they on
energy.
drugs? Like
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
their interviews are
It's,
really weird, and people are like, is this an act to create interest, or are they
of
like
course, I think. They're like holding hands and
Yeah.
like always like, I don't
They
know,
look
just
like
very,
they're a couple. I
yeah.
honestly, this
Yeah.
was a surprise to me because I was like, okay, low-key, y'all are lesbians, right? Like, they look like they're lesbians who are at an IVF consultation in every interview. Now, but the movie was being filmed and they were falling
Like
in
yeah.
love like two
way.
and a half
Yeah.
years ago,
Yeah.
while this
Yeah.
woman had just had this baby, not
Yeah.
realizing her man is stepping out with his co-star, and now the baby's two and a half, and like this
Yeah.
movie just came out and like it's all out
And having
there.
to like relive that. Can you imagine? And her article was so like eloquently written to think of it from that like she was a woman who I mean I don't obviously I don't know, but was cheated on and
Yeah.
when she had a baby and with this celebrity and I think if it was me it would have been full of like F you, F them, Ariana Grande and her whatever, like I just wouldn't have kept it classy or
Yeah.
nice.
But like as a mom, have y'all been in therapy?
So mine was specifically because of getting pregnant. So like I was never a therapy person. I never had issues. But then yes, motherhood, getting pregnant, just threw me immediately, like the overwhelm. And I had some stuff going on and
Yeah.
I just felt like I was going to explode. And someone was like, you should probably go talk to somebody. And so for the first time in my life, I felt that like out of control, that it was like, okay, I have to go find someone. So I got on Google, I looked it up. I picked the person just based on their looks. Like, do you know what like, it's just so like, I don't know anything. And I didn't even want to ask a friend because I still felt, I guess, that stigma of just like, I just can't believe I'm here, but I'm like, I got so many feelings. And yeah, I picked someone and I went. And I mean, that article stuck with me because my first time in therapy, my therapist was like, if I see you in public, I won't acknowledge you unless you acknowledge me. And
Yeah, yeah,
like, it was
yeah.
just kind of like, oh, okay. So everybody's cool with therapy, but like also like, shh. So
Yeah,
um,
yeah,
Don't say
yeah,
it.
yeah,
that
yeah.
was weird. And I kept it quiet for a while until I think the way I would explain it for me is until I was back out of it again, of like out of the desperate, I need to talk to someone. I think I was really quiet about it. And then I spent like the next 2 years being like, everyone should do therapy. It's amazing. Me swinging from
Yeah,
one side to
yeah.
the other where, but it was very important for me early on in pregnancy. And then
This
I
is your first
stayed for
pregnancy?
first pregnancy, unexpected pregnancy, like surprise and just not quite ready. Other things going on that were just like, it was all overwhelming. And then what happened is it felt very, like I can, in retrospect, I don't know that I knew this, but in each week I would be like, I think I'm okay. I don't have anything to talk about. And then I would get in there and be like, like just for an hour straight. I have so much stuff to talk about.
Yeah.
And I do think it was just that little pressure release where instead of just like holding it all in, just having this. And I say too, like, so again, I'm a high school teacher. So all the time with kids that get a little gun shy about talking, I'm like, you got to go, like, when you're paying a person to hear your problems, like, it's the
Hmm.
only time that you can be so unfiltered that you can say anything you want. Because if you go to your mom and you complain about your dad, or you go to your mom and you complain about your husband,
Yeah.
like, it always comes with this other cost. And then you get over it and you're like, no, he's actually a really great husband. I didn't mean to call him an idiot. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
so I really feel like early on when your hormones are nuts and you're just like, there's so many uncertainties, there's so many different styles of being pregnant and birth plans, and like you just feel inadequate no matter what you choose. And like you don't want to talk to your husband about it because it I just felt like it was like the thing I didn't know I needed. And then once I was there, it was like, thank God.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
you are a big proponent of therapy. I feel like still, like,
I am. I've
yeah.
slowly moved away on some opinions about like chronic therapy, long term, whole life. I don't.
Oh, okay.
So, like, I really feel like you should try to get in there and talk and solve. And then,
Right,
Hmm.
like, really, as soon as you can, try to step away. And if you're not
right.
ready, and we did that. My lady was awesome. So she was very like, I think we're good. Like, she probably felt once I started to be like, I don't know what to get at the grocery store. She was like, okay, well, I think our time's up. Yeah. Yeah. So she was really good about being like, yeah, let's go from once a week to once a month. And then it was like, I'm
Yeah.
here if you need me, but also like get out of my office. Yeah. And I've just moved into that space because of, I think it can also be really counterproductive to sit in your negativity week after week. So that's
Yeah.
where I feel like you
Oh,
have to just
yeah.
get a right psychologist, because to just talk about my problems and have the world center around me feels really good, because we all have problems. Like, motherhood is
Yeah.
stress. So there's always, every week you can talk about something, because motherhood is stress. It's worry, it's anxiety. That's the definition of it, in my opinion.
Did you experience any like need for therapy when you were
So
pregnant or
definitely probably had a huge need for therapy, but never went. I mean,
really?
kinda, yeah. And like, so my only experience with therapy is like we've done a little bit of like couples therapy,
Okay.
more like recently than not. But we have since stopped. I think our therapist wasn't like the right fit, which is kind of a weird thing where you think like, oh, they'll be great. And then I don't know, she was, it just didn't
Yeah, it's not
work out, I
always the right
guess.
one.
Yeah, yeah. But like looking back, I think like, gosh, like especially I think with that first baby, I almost think like anyone could benefit from therapy with the first baby because of how
Yes.
like life changing it is. Um,
Mm,
and for some people, like for second or third babies or whatever, it might be helpful. But I really like, I wish I had. Lindsay was like, you should go to therapy. But I was like, nah, can't take her advice. What does she know? Yeah. So that's what my relationship with therapy has been. What about you, V? Have you?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I have been a huge proponent of therapy for a long time, like
Okay.
from the time I was a teenager.
Really?
Yeah. But
Yeah.
I also, you have to remember, I also grew up in a house where I had a dad who was, would abuse substances.
Okay.
And so there was just like a lot of family trauma centered around his issues.
Right.
And so I, in my teen years, started to go to therapy to kind of parse through some things. So even in college, I would occasionally go to the therapist at our, community center
Yeah.
because I knew when I felt like I was in crisis that I needed to just talk it out and work through it with somebody.
But that's amazing even as like a teenager, because I'm, in my late 30s and I feel like I'm just now getting to the point of like, oh, it's coming. It's coming. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so I feel like
Yeah.
that's amazing to that you've known that.
Well, and I've always been a friend that was a good listening ear, but I haven't
Mhm.
always had a ton of friends that were great listening ears.
Mhm.
So it was always a tool for me, but it
Yeah.
wasn't, I would go when I'm in crisis and maybe go for 3 or 4 months,
Mhm.
and then stop. And so I remember when I got pregnant with Justice, or when I found out I was pregnant, because that was kind of a story. I didn't find out I was pregnant until I was like 11 weeks. But anyway,
Yeah.
when I
Yeah.
realized I was pregnant, I was like, oh my gosh, I still have a lot of daddy issues.
Oh gosh, yeah.
And what I didn't want to do was take those issues into my pregnancy and
Mhm.
like into my mothering.
Mhm.
And so I was like, I gotta go back to therapy right now. And I
Mhm.
remember talking to my husband about it, like, hey, just so you know, I'm about to like pick up this therapy thing again. And he was like, really? You're not okay? And I was like, no, I feel okay, but I know I have stuff that's like underneath stuff
Oh,
that
yeah.
I gotta unpack because parenting, you just repeat a bunch of cycles, right? Like what your parent did and what their parent did
Yes.
and what their
Yeah.
parent did.
Yeah.
And I was really determined not to do that. And so I started going back to therapy when I was pregnant.
Okay.
And kind of like to this article, right? I was going to a therapist who was an older white woman, and she was lovely. And she actually did help me through quite a bit. But as a black woman, I felt that there were certain things that were cultural that she just couldn't get.
I
And so I would
bet.
be talking to her about things, and I was like, she don't even know.
Yeah, like,
She has no idea
yeah.
what.
Yeah.
And so then I I saw out another therapist, kind of to your point, because it's like everybody's not going to be the right fit for you.
Yes, yeah.
But I saw out another therapist looking specifically for a black woman, and
Right.
I found one. But as I grew in my career and she grew in her practice, we began to see each other in the same circles.
Oh.
Yeah. So she had that conversation with me, Lindsay, that your therapist had with you, of just like, hey, I saw you at this thing on Thursday. Just to let you know, we totally don't have to address it. I wasn't being cold to you,
Yeah.
just, to try to be a bee. Like, I was just trying to be cool. Like, and I remember that event and her acting as if it was her first time meeting me. And I'm like,
Oh my
oh, yeah,
gosh.
good to meet you too. I'm like, girl, I've been
Oh.
telling you all
Yeah.
my business for months.
I would
You
have
know
gone
me.
into
Yeah.
like the next session being like, why don't you like me? Like, you know. So, anyways.
But yeah, and she focuses on black relationships and like black trauma related to the black experience in America.
Okay.
And so there were things that were attached to my daddy issues that happened to my dad because he's a black man in America who went to Vietnam when he was 17 or
Right.
18, that I just was having a hard time unpacking with an older white woman. And so,
Yes. Yeah.
anyway, yeah,
I
I
understand.
am a strong proponent of therapy. When we had our adoption lost end of last year going into this year, I was like right back at her
Yeah.
door.
Yeah. I'm like,
So I think it's so critical, and I think especially for moms that, you know, we we have this community, right? And I think it's really important to build communities of support, but also know, and I think this is where I am a lot of times, that everybody also is going through something. And as
Hmm.
much as they want to be there for you as your friend and a mom who has been there, they might also be going through something too. And so to have the strength and sort of empathy to give out is not always the case.
Hmm. Hmm.
You know, like right now, I would love to be a better friend, but I cannot.
Hmm.
Too new to us kids, you
Yeah.
know, three kids all together. I really don't have the capacity to be a great friend right
Yeah,
now.
right now. Yeah. But I think that is a but maybe you're not being a great friend right now, but like I feel like that's a like wonderful friendship where you have these periods of like,
Yeah,
well, right now we're not talking, nothing happened, but we just I just feel like that's kind of like the marker of a good friendship in a way, like you
yeah,
can't always
absolutely.
be there for one another maybe the way you wish you could, but then, at times you can, I guess.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I also
So,
just think that's where that professional help, like
yeah.
in motherhood, I think it's like, man, it's the thing that really bonds everyone, right? So like if you're a mom, you're like, I get it, but it's human nature. We can't help it. But as soon as we try to provide comfort for a friend or a mom or whatever, it's like, it's basically just a bunch of our own stories and our
Mhm.
own perspectives. And there's just something about paying a professional where it's like, this is not that they're neutral either. Like I thought that's why her article was so good because she was talking about like how she tries to be neutral, she tries to be
Yeah,
invisible, and
Mhm.
now she can't anymore. But she was kind of basically saying like, remember she ends with saying like, and how does that make you feel? Like now that you know more about my story, how does that
Yeah.
make you feel? And I think
Yeah.
it's a really like powerful thing to be like, I want you to see me. I don't really want to see you, but also she's a woman helping with women's mental health. So it's like
Yeah.
she's also coming from her own experience. So it's a fine line of like
Well,
helpful,
and from that
professional.
article, yeah, did like so she had it was this true? Like it seemed like at 2 months with the baby, she moved like to London
yes,
for
yeah,
her husband's work. I just can't imagine with like a new baby and like the first time mom. And
yeah.
then they end up splitting up. Like the whole thing just seems like, oh my goodness.
Julian, that
Yeah.
quote stuck out to me. She said, you know, she talked about moving to London with him
Yes.
for his
Yeah.
career, and she says,
Yes.
consumed by the magic and mundanity of new motherhood, I didn't understand the growing distance between us.
Yeah.
Whew.
Ooh.
So this is where Momtradiction was born. Like just as like a reminder, because I've kind of chatted with both of you, but the play on words of mom and contradiction was like
Yeah,
that magic and mundanity. Like it's like that is the Momtradiction because it felt so strong in me that for a person that doesn't really like pre-kids, I didn't really question things. I was spontaneous. I did things. I made mistakes. I said, who cares? And then it was like this weight came about with motherhood that was just opposite feelings. Like, how can I love something so much that it's all I think about? It consumes everything. But all I can think about is like, when do I get a break? When is it bedtime? When can I take a shower? When, like that opposite feeling and the magic, because you're like really in awe of like, this little creature is growing and doing new things like every day, but you're also like, I haven't done anything. Like my husband and I had big issues with that because he was very sweet and supportive. Like he would come home and I was just like covered in spit up and just like, I've done nothing all day. And he's like, you're literally raising like our baby. Like he was really good about being like, you're doing the single most important thing that anyone could do. But I'm like, yeah, but I've done nothing. Like I've done nothing day after
yeah.
day, day in, day out. It starts to feel mundane and it's laundry, it's dishes, it's cleaning bottles, it's nursing on a schedule. It's just day in, day out. But until you step away and see, oh my gosh, look how much they've changed in 6 months. I'm like, you just don't feel like you're doing anything. It's
Mhm.
wild.
Yeah. It's I don't know. I just can't imagine not having any support from anyone. Do you know what I mean? Like not it
Yeah.
seemed like she didn't have anybody, and then to also then have this like rift with your
I
husband.
think the truth of the matter is that it's not uncommon, right? That people's relationships sort of get blown up
Yeah.
when they have a baby. I've seen a ton of relationships break up at that time that it just the stress.
I feel like some men will be like, "Oh, like why like your body doesn't look the way it used to, or your body
Yeah.
isn't, you know what I mean? Or like you, you're not taking care of yourself as well or something. You know what I mean?
Or you're
Or
not
like
taking care of me. Like you're
me,
not cooking me
yeah.
dinner or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah. Or even like the sex component, you know what I mean? Where it's like,
Yeah.
oh, well, I just feel like a lot of that, you find like a lot of men that I don't know is a thing.
Do y'all feel like your relationships with your husbands like struggled in those early months of motherhood?
We were in a bad spot. So we were engaged to be married. And then the pregnancy happened. Like we got surprised a little early. We knew we would have kids right away after getting married, but we were not married yet. And then so that added a layer of stress. Like I think some people get married and have kids and they plan it out in every detail and they're kind of looking forward to like this is the fairy tale, and then maybe they're disappointed, if that makes sense. And then for me, I feel like we were the opposite, where we were like in the hard part and it was like, oh my gosh, we just have to make this work. And then now it's like been better. I don't know if that makes sense. It's just like a flip flop where I'm like, we started with really low expectations and like they've only gotten better. uh and I like now that it's all worked out, I'm like, it's actually a great way to go because I thought, oh my God, marriage is hard, motherhood is hard, everything's hard. So now, like 7 years later, I'm like, oh, actually, this is a piece of cake compared to what we've been through, which is also
Hmm.
including
Oh
me
yeah.
being very postpartum, which like we'll save for another episode. But we were not in a good place to begin with.
So our parents were old when they had us. Justin was like a miracle baby. His mom was told forever she wouldn't have kids, and then she popped out too after 16 years of marriage, I think it was.
Okay.
So our parents were like old and seasoned, right? And so we always say we grew up with old parents, and that made us kind of old souls ourselves. At the same time, both of us had lost our mothers. He lost his mother in college, and we lost my mom the first year of our marriage. And so, because we didn't have grandmothers, we
Oh,
delayed having children
yeah.
because we were just like, well, nobody's going to be here to help us with these kids.
Yeah, yeah,
So let's
yeah,
wait
yeah.
until we are a little bit more like solid in our marriage before we do that. And I think that was just like, our old parents' wisdom kind of coming into our decision making. So when we had our daughter, I don't feel like a lot about our relationship was on the fritz. Like we felt the stress of things, but I think that in the 6 years of marriage that we had before having a kid, we had worked through how are we going to behave when this happens? Okay, how are we going to behave when this happens? And we had gone through, like I said, the loss of my mom. We'd gone through two layoffs at that point. Like we just like gone through some stuff.
You'd seen some shit. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Like,
So by the
yeah,
time we had
yeah.
a
That
kid, we
like,
were like, okay, this is
okay.
hard. This isn't like that much harder than like losing a parent. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. Like
Um,
this. Yeah, yeah. The
like I think our
perspective.
perspective was just different.
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah,
because
yeah.
we had gone through some stuff, and when we have conflict or we feel, if I feel unsupported, like, hey, dude, I need you to do more. It's just a matter of communication. It's not a personal indictment on his fatherhood.
Hmm.
It's just like, hey, I need you to do XYZ. That'll be really helpful to our household and our shared
Hmm.
goals. And he's like, all right, cool.
Hmm.
So we didn't really have so much of that, but like I said, I've seen it a ton.
Hmm.
What about
Yeah.
y'all, Julianne?
So I think it was probably more like me. So when I got pregnant, we weren't married, but we have been together since we were 17. So, it wasn't like we already had our house. I don't remember if we were engaged. I think we were engaged. I can't remember. Um, and like we weren't not trying for a baby, but we weren't necessarily, you know what I mean? Like it was just so she wasn't really a surprise, but kind of a surprise. And I think more for me, it was like the decision to like stop working kind of came into play a lot, because then it was even more so of like, well, I'm at home with this baby and you know what I mean? You're gone. Like my life has changed so much. Um, and this was like my parents live in our neighborhood now, but before that they didn't. And so it just felt very much like isolating, like I don't have my job anymore. We had lived here for maybe like 2 or 3 years, and like I knew people, but I'm not the best at making friends, so I just felt very much like, "Oh, I'm on an island," but then his life got to like continue, like he would still get to go to work. I
Yeah.
think just with your first baby, like for me it was just like my life is over in a way. Where now
Yeah.
I don't even like to say that because that's so opposite of the truth, you know? Um, but I just felt, and even like Luke is so good with newborns, and I'm kind of like, newborns, they're like,
Yeah,
kind of take
me
them or
too.
leave them. They're not that cute. Like, you got to be on that
Alien.
schedule. Like, yeah, like, but Luke like loves the schedule, just loves everything about it. So he was so helpful. But then even like with breastfeeding, it's like, but I still have to like, I'm still
You're on
breast,
the
you know what I
schedule.
mean? I'm
Yep.
still like, I can't, even if you want me to sleep all night, like I can't, so I think I just, again, I think that played more into me and what I was going through than like him. Um, and I think like you said, Lindsay, where your husbands and they're just like, oh my gosh, but you're raising this baby and this and that. And you just feel like,
It's
I'm a
so unfair.
blob.
Yeah.
It's so unfair. Nothing's happening in my life, and you get to go off and work.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
Yes.
like.
Yes.
So I don't know. And so then I can't
So,
imagine thinking of like, and then your husband like cheats on you with like the
yeah,
biggest star of like not the biggest star, but like pretty big.
pretty
You
big
know?
right now. It's
Yeah, and
everywhere.
had been pretty big for a while. So I just can't. I mean, you'll never know the details, but I can't even imagine that. Um,
Well, Julianne, I feel
yeah,
like you hit on this part of the article that really stunned me.
yeah,
She says, motherhood, I have learned, fills your time, but
yeah,
not your mind.
yeah.
And like when I first read it, I felt some type of way because I was like, wait, you, especially as like a new temporary stay-at-home mom, I
Hmm.
felt some type of way because I'm like, I'm in here busting my butt, and you're
Hmm.
saying that this is not filling my mind,
Hmm.
and like so I thought about it, and I was like, well, it, I mean, it fills your heart.
Yeah.
It fills your heart, but I don't know that. I don't think she's wrong on this. What do y'all think?
No, I feel like it's so spot on because it fills the not filling your mind is I'm like it unfortunately and fortunately it becomes so mindless so fast because it's like every 2 weeks there might be like a new like now they're smiling or now they're this, but it's like it's not that your mind isn't working, but it's the stuff that's like keeping the schedule. Now I have to wash the bottle, now I have to like it's just this like very basic. I mean, it is basic. You're just keeping them alive. Like you're not
Yeah,
reading to them. I mean, you are reading to them actually, but I mean, I don't know. I'm fully in agreement. So you feel so exhausted at the end of the day, but you're like, all I've thought about is this little 10-pound bag of flesh. I don't know if you guys feel this way because I've kind of identified this as something that I'm like, there's no, like at a work project, you might have something for a whole like a month or a quarter or a year. Like you could really be working on things or with your husband, you're like doing projects in the house and there's just like a start and a finish and there's a
yeah,
check it off the list. And again, with motherhood, like there is no, you did that quote the other day that now I love where it's like back at the starting line. Great job. Back at the starting line. Hey, you did the laundry back at the starting line. Like, so that feeling of you really have to think to like conquer, divide, finish this project start to finish, and then you get that satisfaction of it's done. Well, with motherhood, there is none of that. Like, there's nothing, because even the most you're doing is like Googling what to do next because your baby's gassy. And then you get 14 different answers and you're convinced, like, because you spend all this mind, like mental energy, but you really just come out with like, I don't know, what's your gut say is like wrong with
Yes.
the baby
Yeah,
or
your
what to
gut
do.
intuition. I had mixed feelings on it because I think as like a stay-at-home mom and as someone who's been a stay-at-home mom since I had my first daughter, that it felt like a little like belittling toward stay-at-home moms, and then she's throwing in the Dr. Lily J, and then it just, and again, that might speak more to me and how like I perceive myself, but um
That's a
I
good
don't know.
perspective, though. Say it. I'm like, yeah, you feel
Yeah.
like offended.
Like I don't think like I'm not mindless because I take care. You know what I mean? I feel like okay, you get a lot of joy or mental stimulation or whatever it is from like your job. But like this is my job. You know what I mean? And
Totally.
yeah, so I just like maybe it's a little bit of a sore spot for me.
Similar feelings, Julianne, because I was
Yeah.
just like, I mean, this is so hard, right? And the truth of the
Yeah.
matter is, and I remember when we founded Natalist, we hired all moms for that
Mhm.
team. And our whole philosophy was moms get stuff done. You know why?
Mhm.
Because we don't
Mhm.
have time to sit around the water cooler and chit chat. We need
Yeah.
to get this stuff done so we can go pick up our kid and we need to begin our second shift of life today, which
Yeah.
is being a full time mom.
Yeah.
And so I felt that way. Also, there's research that supports the fact that your brain literally makes new pathways and expands once you physically have a child. So,
So
like,
nuts.
your brain, like, just as your breasts expand with milk, your brain
Yeah.
expands with new pathways and capacity to be able to perform the duties of this job.
Mhm.
So, I kind of was in my feelings a little bit too, but I get what she was saying, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Yeah. Yeah.
she was just talking about this whole storm that she's walked through has impacted her in more ways than one, right?
Yes.
Where
Yeah.
she
Yeah.
is just like feeling very, she has the grief of the loss of the love of her life.
Well, then
She
I felt
has,
bad being like, I'm gonna
yeah,
fight this woman who, like, wait a second, like, take it back here. This is not about you, Julianne. Like, this is like this, you know what I mean? Like, it's
It's like a
just like,
broken-hearted woman. Yeah.
yeah, where I'm like, what? Like, what are you saying
you want to
here? Like,
fight?
yeah, you
That's
know, so
so interesting though,
like,
because I swear I felt so connected to that statement. So this is
yeah.
like crazy that I'm like, oh yeah, I didn't think you could read it any other way. So I'm like happy
Oh,
to hear
yeah.
you say, like, no, I was
Like,
offended, because
yeah,
that's how I
yeah,
felt. Like that's why I went back to work, because I was like,
yeah.
I got to go back and
I
check
gotta
some things off
get
a
something.
list. Like I got
Yeah,
to
yeah,
just get out of this house.
yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
That's
but I
fair. That's
also
fair.
changed. You mentioned like firstborn to secondborn.
Yeah,
Secondborn,
it's
it's like
totally
I
different.
would have enjoyed every minute of it, and I probably would have done more research and knowledge. Like I just was like not there. But yeah. So
Yeah.
Okay.
if you had to pick a therapist, would you pick her or not?
Ooh.
Because
Well, and
Well,
I couldn't believe how she said like she deals a lot with women that are going through like tough pregnancies or are gonna
yes.
like
yes.
lose the baby or have like big whatever. So I can't imagine that like being in that situation and seeing your doctor like pregnant.
I know.
Like I would be like, no, I can't,
I
you
would
know.
probably, yeah, I would probably just
Yeah.
stop making
But
my
like her
appointments after
awareness
that.
of that was really like how she was like, I'd wear baggy
I like
sweaters and
baggy
like I
sweaters.
wouldn't say
Yes.
anything. Like I'm just like, what an odd tightrope to walk where you're
I
like
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
so happy.
Yeah.
So
And I
my
wonder what she brings
therapist,
home. Sorry. I'm just like
yeah,
also
Yeah.
no,
like
go ahead.
Yeah.
listening to women's
No,
problems. And
Yeah.
then you do wonder, like, not to be all up in their shit, but it's like, does like was she bringing home the weight of all the women and the bad pregnancies and the whatever? And then like the husband Ethan was just like, fuck, I can't get a break. And so do you know what I'm
yeah,
saying? Like, did she just
No.
like, and I'm not
Yeah.
blaming, that makes like sounds like I'm blaming her. Like
No,
he's
no,
still an
victim
no.
blaming.
asshole, but it's like
Yeah.
you do wonder how heavy it
Yeah,
weighed on
it's
her
a
as
heavy
a
job.
therapist of
Yeah. Yeah.
really intense, like hard pregnancies, women's mental
Yeah,
health. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
we're a tricky creature with the mental health. So it's like
Yeah.
that's
yeah.
no easy job.
Yeah.
No,
That
what I
was
was
good.
gonna say was, so I had been seeing my therapist for probably like 3 years. And so when I'm kind of in crisis, like, oh, I just had an adoption loss, I'm going every week.
Mhm.
And then
Yeah.
we taper off to like once every 6 weeks, just like a check in kind of thing.
Mhm.
Well, anyway, I think I wasn't in crisis, but I was dealing with a lot with like my business stuff. So I was going like at least maybe once every 3 weeks. But
Same.
Yeah.
she can do it, but I just was like,
Yeah.
I'm happy to just have her as my own therapist. And
Yeah.
at one point I wanted Justin to start going, and Justin wasn't really keen on going. And
Mhm.
so I remember talking to her about it, and she was like, Vernita, really, like, if you work on yourself, your relationship will get better. So,
Mhm.
like, let's not focus on Justin not coming in here, and let's just focus on you coming in here.
That's good advice. Yeah,
And
yeah.
and I yeah, I
I
felt
can
like it
appreciate
was
that.
great
Yeah.
advice. And so I just have maintained her as my own
Your
therapist.
personal. Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Nice.
but
It's
it was
interesting
interesting.
because that's also like a Dr. Lily J, whatever her name is, quote, where she talked about the like, no one's going to say he's not a good surgeon because he's never had an EKG or whatever. Or, yeah, like that quote where I'm like, that's so true. And now I would not have thought this when I was in therapy or new to therapy. I wouldn't have thought this, but now, like, kind of running the whole path, I'm like, hell yeah, to someone that's actually been through some stuff. Like, I think
Yeah,
Yeah.
she's much
Yeah.
more qualified because, like, that was me. I never had any mental health. And then when I had postpartum depression, it's like that's what turned me into like an empathetic person. That's what it rocked my world because all of a sudden I was like, holy shit, do people feel like this all the time? Like it really changed the way that I judged or didn't judge because I was like, whoa, this is like a whole new side of the earth that like sucks.
Mhm.
And I can't believe that some people are doing this like day in, day out. And so I just feel a little like in my wisdom now, I'm like, hell yeah to the therapist that's been through some shit. Like, I
yeah.
Mhm.
just think,
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. That's what's weird is I would go to her now if I was going through a divorce, like if things got bad and me and Justin were already there, I would go to her to help me pick up the pieces. But if
yeah,
me and Justin were on our way to bad, I would not go to her.
Yeah.
yeah, because you're like, you didn't crack the
Yeah.
code.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, you took some wrong path somewhere.
Yeah, it probably did impact her business to some degree, but also it's like things work out how they are supposed to be are
Mhm.
supposed to, and she probably still has a very full client list,
Yeah.
Oh, it's crazy.
Well, our heart goes out to you, Dr. Lily J. Girl, keep on keeping on.
Yeah.
What are y'all nailing and failing this week?
Start with my failing after recording this episode. I feel like I look like an Oompa Loompa tonight. There's a lot of like
Oh.
orange in color.
Yeah.
Now
Oh,
that you
yeah.
mention it, yes.
Oh,
So
yes. Yeah.
I'll save
Yeah.
my other 7 fails for next week.
Yeah.
That's my fail. My nail is Christmas. I felt all the
Yay.
feelings of like
Yay.
we pulled it off. It wasn't flawless. There was like, you know what I mean?
Of course.
But
Yeah. It
I
was.
just feel like Christmas Eve and Christmas, lots of family time. Kids were like gracious. I feel like nailed it is too strong of a word.
Yeah. Yeah.
We nailed it.
So, my failed it would be I had to take both girls to the doctors today. They both have strep throat. Stella has an earache, and we're going on an international vacation on Saturday. So, I don't know. I guess I'm failing. Something's failing, but it doesn't feel good. So,
Oh,
but now I'm worried that we're gonna get there and then I'm
oh,
gonna be like, oh. And of course, as soon as we heard it, I'm like, oh, my throat's feeling. But I think I just put it in my own mind, so who knows? But that would be the fail. Um, and nailing, I mean, I guess I would say Christmas as well. I mean,
yeah.
we just it was nice, it was low key, I mean, too many presents where today I'm like, who bought all these presents? And like, who decorated this house? Like, get it all out of here,
Gosh,
I
yes.
said
Like,
that
I'm
too. It was
just
like,
over
Merry
it.
Christmas. Spring cleaning starts tomorrow.
Feeling of like,
Thank you for the invite. I'm not able to attend to
yes.
several things, and I think it was the right call because I'm perpetually exhausted, which leads to my fail. But it was just like, I don't need to take on more things right now. Like I
But that's
did.
amazing to be able to
A,
be like, I can't. We
no
can't go.
thanks. Yeah.
Sorry.
Please
Yeah.
invite us next year. Please think of
Yeah.
us again later.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
said a lot of no's that I felt good about. But
Yeah.
my fail is that my 6-year old asked me yesterday, how come you're always so tired? And I wanted to say, well, look in the mirror, baby girl, but I didn't. I said, well, this is a really busy time of the year. So
You.
glad to have you with us on this journey. Take care. Keep momming.
Bye.
Hey,
Bye.
I'm
I
done. It's
know.
over. Yeah.
yeah.
I feel the same way. Like
Christmas was good.